You said the WNBA, they're targeting Caitlin Clark.
So the kid was set up for failure right from the beginning. This kid's on the wrong team. She's got the wrong skill set to handle, and she's a rookie.
Caitlin Clark, the rising superstar rewriting basketball storylines, has just flipped the script on one of the game's most untouchable figures, Coach Geno Auriemma. The architect of UConn's dynasty, Geno has always seemed beyond reach. But when Caitlin rejected an opportunity linked to him, her response hit so hard, so bold, that many believe it left the Hall of Fame coach utterly humiliated. So, what really went down between these two icons? Today, we peel back the curtain on the exchange that shook women's basketball, the rejection that ignited a legacy. Because Caitlin Clark's story of disrespect didn't suddenly begin on national TV this year. It began years ago, back when she was just a high school phenom with one dream. And that dream, like countless young girls before her, was simple: to wear the jersey of the University of Connecticut. For Caitlin, UConn wasn't just a college. It was the college, the dynasty, the machine that created legends like Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, Breanna Stewart. It was the mountain every player wanted to climb. Clark even admitted in interviews, "I loved UConn. I thought they were the coolest place on earth." That was her vision, her obsession. But then, the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. Despite being one of the greatest scorers of her generation, Clark revealed UConn's interest was lukewarm at best. A few calls to her AAU coach, and that was it. Geno Auriemma, the recruiter famous for spotting greatness before anyone else, never once reached out to Caitlin or her family. And when asked later, his answers sounded more like excuses. He claimed Paige Buchers was already locked in, and he didn't want 2-point guards clashing for the same spot. But then came the moment that burned itself into Caitlin's memory. Geno suggested that if she truly wanted UConn, she should have called him. Imagine that. The most decorated coach in women's basketball shrugging off generational talent, then shifting the blame onto a teenager. That single moment, that careless dismissal, wasn't just an oversight. It was the first brick in a wall of disrespect that Caitlin Clark would spend years tearing down. And history would remember it as one of the costliest missteps the sport had ever seen. But here's the real twist. Caitlin didn't crumble. She turned that rejection into fuel. And the fire it sparked would lead Geno Auriemma toward a humiliation no one could have imagined. From overlooked recruit to unstoppable game changer. When Caitlin Clark chose Iowa, most shrugged it off. To them, it was a fallback, a safe option. After all, Iowa wasn't UConn. It wasn't the factory of legends that decorated bedroom walls across America. Iowa was steady, sure, but ordinary, not the place to chase greatness. But Clark wasn't chasing someone else's definition of greatness. She wanted freedom. Freedom to lead. Freedom to craft her own story. At UConn, she'd have been another star bent into Geno's mold, part of the machine. At Iowa, she wasn't just another piece. She was the piece, the centerpiece of everything. From the very first moment, Iowa was hers. She walked in and took command like it had always belonged to her. The gyms in Iowa City began to overflow, packed with people desperate to catch a glimpse. Her highlights flooded social media. Shared so relentlessly, they transformed her into a household name almost overnight. Those impossible deep threes, they weren't just buckets, they were statements. Every time she launched from the logo, it was a warning to the world. Women's basketball was changing, and she was the one rewriting its future. While Geno clung to his throne, Caitlin was quietly building an empire, one shot, one roar, one night at a time. Arenas sold out. Road games stopped feeling like games and started feeling like concerts. Crowds weren't just showing up for their teams. They were showing up for her. For Caitlin Clark, TV ratings that had once flatlined suddenly shattered records. Networks that barely noticed women's hoops before were now scrambling to put her front and center. She wasn't just creating fans. She was creating a movement. And none of this happened by accident. Clark didn't stumble into fame. She demanded it. She didn't need UConn's banners or Geno's blessing. Iowa gave her the canvas, and she painted it in gold. From afar, Geno watched it all unfold. But instead of owning his mistake, he doubled down. His words always came with that sting. praising Caitlin with one hand, undercutting her with the other. Fans noticed. Experts noticed. Every time he hyped up Paige Buchers. It wasn't just about Paige. It was Geno reminding the world he was still the kingmaker. But here's the truth. Caitlin Clark didn't fit in his system. She couldn't. And when the sly jab stopped working, Geno turned his fire elsewhere. Not at her, but at the millions who adored her. And that's when everything blew up. The meltdown that rocked the basketball world. June 2024. The Dan Patrick Show. Geno Auriemma went nuclear. He didn't just throw shade, he dropped a grenade. He mocked Caitlin Clark supporters, calling them delusional, clueless, and his words, so stupid they were hurting women's basketball itself. His fury came down to one thing: those fans who believed Clark could finish top 4 in MVP voting as a rookie. Geno laughed. He dismissed it as fantasy, the ramblings of people who didn't understand the pro game. But this wasn't criticism of a player. It was war against the heartbeat of the sport. The same fans who had injected new life, money, and global attention into women's basketball. And that's where the revenge story truly begins. Because Clark didn't trade insults. She didn't clap back in interviews. She did it the only way she knew how, through her game. And the result? Rookie of the Year, All WNBA, first team. And when the MVP votes were counted, she finished 4th, exactly where her so-called delusional fans had predicted. Every arrogant dismissal, every smug critique, was shattered on the hardwood by Caitlin's play. Geno's words, once cloaked as wisdom, now stand as one of the most embarrassing takes in modern sports. He wanted to be seen as the wise elder, the gatekeeper of basketball knowledge. But instead, he looked bitter, outdated, a relic fading fast in the rearview mirror. Caitlin's triumph wasn't just hers. It was vindication for every single fan he had mocked. Geno had drawn a line in the sand, and Caitlin erased it like it was nothing. Yet Geno couldn't move on. His obsession grew with every viral highlight, every packed arena, every record Caitlin broke. He just couldn't stop talking about her. A clear sign she was living rent-free in his head. His desperation peaked in a jaw-dropping interview, where he actually tried to steal credit for the very movement he once dismissed. "You all jumped on Caitlin Clark's clapback and wrote it straight up," he scoffed. In his mind, fans, media, even the league itself weren't celebrating her. They were opportunists hitching themselves to a phenomenon that he and the so-called keepers of the game had built. It was stunning denial, because Caitlin Clark wasn't the passenger. She was the rocket, a force of nature he never saw coming. And that's the real truth. This was never just about one player and one coach. It was a generational power shift. The old guard versus the new wave. Geno thought he would be the author of Caitlin's story. Instead, she rewrote his legacy in real time. But here's the question that lingers. If this feud has already shaken women's basketball to its core, what happens in the final act? What happens when Caitlin's rise leaves no space for the kingmaker who once dismissed her? When silence cuts deeper than words? See, when Geno Auriemma speaks, the basketball world usually listens. His voice carries weight, his reputation commands respect, and his words have shaped narratives for decades. That's why his attacks on Caitlin Clark and her fans weren't just reckless, they were revealing. By branding her supporters delusional and clueless, he wasn't only insulting them. He was sending a coded message about her. Geno was saying, this hype isn't real. These fans don't get it. And when the dust settles, I'll be proven right. But here's the twist. He wasn't right. He was spectacularly wrong. And the sweetest part? Caitlin never even responded. No shade on social media. No cryptic tweets. No fiery interviews. She didn't need to, because she had something far stronger than words. Her game. While Geno was busy on talk shows dismissing her rise as overblown hype, Caitlin was busy rewriting history. Night after night, she unleashed performances that looked like they were stitched together from a highlight reel. Logo threes that left defenders shaking their heads. Crossovers that froze opponents in disbelief. No-look passes that turned routine possessions into viral moments. She wasn't just hooping. She was reshaping the sport itself. And when the season's awards rolled in, They told the story better than any debate ever could. Rookie of the Year, first team All-WNBA, and the crown jewel, finishing fourth in MVP voting, exactly where those so-called delusional fans had predicted from the start. Do you see the poetry in that? Geno called them dreamers. Caitlin made them prophets. He claimed they didn't understand the game. She proved they understood it better than he did. Every jumper she buried was a rebuttal. Every record she smashed was a clapback. Every sold-out arena was proof this wasn't hype. It was history being written in real time. And as Caitlin's star kept rising, Geno's words aged like spoiled milk. What once sounded like wisdom now stank of bitterness. What once carried authority now dripped with insecurity. But with her dominance undeniable, the question lingers. Will Geno finally own his mistake, or will his pride push him to swing back even harder? Silent revenge. That's Clark's greatest weapon. He wanted to stand tall as the gatekeeper, the wise elder, the voice who defined greatness in women's basketball. For years, that illusion worked. But Caitlin Clark's game stripped it away, piece by piece. Every logo three, every dazzling dime, every roaring crowd made him look less like a master of the game and more like what he really was, an aging figure, out of touch, watching the future pass him by. And here's the delicious irony. Caitlin didn't even care about revenge. She wasn't playing to silence Geno. She wasn't chasing his respect. She wasn't even thinking about him. She was simply Caitlin Clark, unapologetically herself. And in doing so, she exposed him without ever lifting a finger. That's the art of silent revenge. No fiery press conferences, no cryptic tweets, no staged clapbacks. Just results. Undeniable, unshakable, impossible to ignore. By the end of her rookie season, the conversation wasn't about whether she lived up to the hype. It was about how completely she obliterated every doubt, every slight, every insult thrown her way. Rookie of the Year, first team All-WNBA, fourth in MVP voting. The very delusional predictions her fans shouted were now etched into history. And for Geno, there was no escape hatch. Every jab he threw, every dismissive word, came back like a boomerang, striking him square in the face. The once untouchable coach, the so-called kingmaker, was humbled by a rookie who never once stooped to his level. For most, that would be the ending. You take the loss, you move on. But Geno couldn't, because by now, it wasn't just about Caitlin Clark the player, it was about Caitlin Clark the symbol. A power shift, a generational handover, the old guard giving way to the new. A new era had arrived, one where the game no longer revolved around him. And here's the question. Will Geno finally accept that the torch has passed, or will he keep swinging at a battle he's already lost? The million-dollar rejection. Geno Auriemma, one of the loudest, most decorated figures in women's basketball, wasn't content with being remembered only as a coach. After decades of dominance on the sidelines, he wanted more. He wanted to be known not just as a tactician, but as a builder of empires. That's why he threw his weight behind a brand new venture, the unrivaled 3-on-3 basketball league. From the outside, it looked unstoppable. Big names, big promises, big investors. Co-founded by stars like Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, the pitch was bold, revolutionized women's basketball and draw fans like never before. But there was one fatal flaw. Every league needs a face, a singular icon who can sell tickets, break records, and light up screens. And that face could only be Caitlin Clark. She wasn't just another player. She was the player, the name every fan knew, the highlight reel breaking the internet night after night. If Unrivaled wanted legitimacy, they needed her at the front. So the league made its move. Reports confirmed they put a record-shattering deal on the table. Over $1 million for just an 8-week season. Jaw-dropping, historic, desperate, and at the center of it all, Geno. The irony was impossible to ignore. The very man who once brushed Clark aside, who wouldn't even pick up the phone during her recruitment, was now sliding her $1 million check. He needed her to validate his league. He needed her to save him from his own mistake. Geno, who had always held the power, was suddenly the one begging, and sports media waited for her answer like it was the final possession of a tied championship game. What would she decide? Then came the twist that flipped the basketball world upside down. Caitlin Clark said no. One word, one rejection, and everything changed. She didn't just turn down the deal. She turned down Geno, his league, his approval, his attempt to rewrite her story. This wasn't about money. It was about principle. Years of disrespect, all crystallized into one moment of poetic justice. Without Clark, Unrivaled crumbled before it ever launched. No star, no spark, no shot. Fans mocked Geno across social media, calling it the humiliation of his career. His arrogance had cost him millions, his credibility, his aura of control. Caitlin didn't need to clap back with words. Her revenge came in silence, delivered by walking away. Geno's time is fading. Hers is only beginning. The real question isn't whether Geno regrets it, because he does. The real question is what comes next, now that Caitlin Clark controls the game on and off the court. The power shift is undeniable. And this story isn't just about basketball. It's about pride, control, and the generational shift shaking women's sports to its core. They were the gatekeepers, the self-appointed kings and queens of women's basketball. They decided who deserved the spotlight, who was worthy of praise, and who would be brushed off as nothing but hype. But power has a way of slipping through your hands when you least expect it. And in this case, it slipped the second Caitlin Clark proved she never needed them. Not for approval, not for opportunity, and definitely not for a paycheck. Because Caitlin's rise is bigger than basketball. It marks a new era, one where athletes control their own platforms, command their own fan bases, and force the world to pay attention on their terms. The torch wasn't politely passed. It was ripped away, and the old guard never even saw it coming. The reckoning arrived with a rejection so quiet, so devastating. It shook the foundation of a legacy that once felt untouchable. And let's be clear, this wasn't random. Every dismissive comment, every backhanded compliment, every time her achievements were downplayed, it all built to this moment. And the beauty? Caitlin Clark never needed to plot revenge. She didn't need to clap back or shout from the rooftops. All she had to do was keep doing what she does best, breaking records, selling out arenas, and proving her greatness one game at a time. Until one day, the very man who once ignored her calls showed up with a contract in hand, begging her to save him. The irony is staggering. The coach who claimed her fame was exaggerated now, tried to cash in on it. The same man who mocked her fans as delusional was suddenly praying those delusional fans would buy tickets, stream games, and keep a struggling league alive. It was the ultimate reversal, a Hollywood-level twist so perfect it almost felt scripted. But make no mistake, this wasn't just business. It was personal. When Caitlin said no, she wasn't just turning down $1 million offer. She was rejecting him, his system, and his desperate attempt to rewrite her story as if he had ever been the gatekeeper of her success. Her answer was simple, but it was powerful. I don't need you. I don't need your league. I built this myself, and I'll keep building without you. And that's the real story here. Not whether Geno regrets his arrogance. Of course he does. The bigger question is what happens now that the gatekeepers finally realize their grip on the game is slipping. Caitlin's decision wasn't just a personal win. It was a warning shot. Proof that women's basketball no longer belongs to the old guard. It belongs to the players, the ones who don't need permission, don't need validation, and won't hesitate to walk away from $1 million checks if the principle isn't right. Maybe revenge isn't best served cold. Maybe the sweetest revenge is delivered in silence, with one devastating word, no. And Caitlin Clark delivered it flawlessly. This rejection wasn't just aimed at Geno. It was a warning to the entire old guard. The game now belongs to a new generation. Geno learned the hard way. But the real question is, who will be next? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments below.